I was reading a biography on Nikola Tesla and stumbled upon a chapter where the book shared some of his beliefs and predictions for the future of women. I was rather surprised by how accurate his predictions were, considering that this following quote was made by him towards a newspaper interview in the 1920s. Quote, "It is clear to any trained observer, and even to the sociologically untrained, that a new attitude toward sex discrimination has come over the world through the centuries, receiving an abrupt stimulus just before and after the World War, obviously World War I. This struggle of the human female towards sex equality will end in a new sex order, with the female as superior. The modern woman, who anticipates in merely superficial phenomena the advancement of her sex, is but a surface symptom of something deeper and more potent fermenting in the bosom of the race. It is not in the shallow physical imitation of men that women will assert first their equality and later their superiority, but in the awakening of the intellect of woman." End quote. So, in that last statement there, Tesla was saying how women were beginning to imitate men physically, I'm assuming in their dress, and considering this was the 1920s leading into the 30s, that would make sense. Tesla goes on to predict the acquisition of new fields of endeavor by women and their gradual usurpation of leadership as the inevitable result of that previously repressed potential newly uncorked by the interconnectivity and educational empowerment that wireless technology would make possible. Through countless generations, from the very beginning, the social subservience of women resulted naturally in the partial atrophy, or at least a hereditary suspension of mental qualities which we now know the female sex to be endowed with no less than men. But the female mind has demonstrated a capacity for all the mental acquirements and achievements of men, and as generations ensue, that capacity will be expanded. The average woman will be as well educated as the average man, and then better educated, for the dormant faculties of her brain will be stimulated to an activity that will be all more intense and powerful because of centuries of repose. Women will ignore precedent and startle civilization with their progress. I also have some quotes from a secondary source here. Tesla would go on to explain that woman competing with men was one of the greatest tragedies he saw in the world, and that no good would come of it for civilization as a whole. Quote, "The world has experienced many tragedies, but to my mind the greatest tragedy of all is the present economic condition, wherein women strive against men, and in many cases actually succeed in usurping their places in the professions and in industry." End quote. The inventor explained in cringeworthy detail. Quote, "This growing tendency of women to overshadow the masculine is a sign of deteriorating civilization." End quote. "Perhaps the male in human society is useless. I am frank to admit that I don't know," Tesla conceded. "If women are beginning to feel this way about it, and there is striking evidence at hand that they do, then we are entering upon the cruelest period of the world history." Now, keep in mind that this statement by Tesla was made just 4 years after women had gained voting rights in the United States. So what do I think of Tesla's prediction of a matriarchal empire? Well, here we are almost 100 years later after he made that statement. And are we in a matriarchal empire? Some might say yes, but overall, I'd say no, not quite yet. I'd say the shift in power balance, at least at a low level, is shifted in the favor of women. Tesla here predicted that women would surpass men in terms of education, higher education, and to an extent that is true. If you do a quick search for men versus female enrollment in higher education in universities, women tend to have the higher enrollment number by a slight margin as of now. Roughly 60% to 40% is the ratio of female to men in higher education today. I'm also seeing women surpass men in the corporate world. I've noticed that in your typical office setting, particularly in an urban environment, in a downtown city environment, it's dominated overwhelmingly by females, or let me more accurately say, feminine personalities, which means obviously there are men who have feminine personalities and vice versa. Do I think the actual power, is there really a power shift at the top level? No, I still think the top level is dominated by masculine personalities. But you are seeing the elimination of lower level positions for masculine personalities. Those roles, as the global environment shifts from a agricultural and manufacturing economy to that of services and idea, you are seeing an increasing level of females and feminine personalities in these lower level roles, hence human resources people, social workers, etc. Now, the theme of this channel is Sith ideology and how It's applied to the real world. And as such, I don't think that this is really something to complain about, because in the end, all that matters is who has power, and whining about it does not fix that. If women are surpassing men in these areas, and if they are headed towards, if we are headed towards a matriarchal empire, the average person, the average man, is going to suffer. And in other words, it's going to become increasingly difficult to survive when your opportunities for jobs, social status are diminished greatly. What's important in my mind is to develop your skills to rival that of the ones valued now in our feminine society. Feminine personalities are better than masculine ones when it comes to the areas of social skills, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and overall being able to cooperate with people and socialize. By strengthening those areas, you will be putting yourself in the best position to survive in this new world hierarchy. Overall, I believe Tesla was partially correct in his prediction for the future. Women are starting to surpass men in certain areas, but not all. I still believe men and masculine personalities are in control when it comes to the overall tip-top level, hence why most of the world's billionaires are men, and the few that are women either had some sort of inheritance or gained that money through a divorce. We are seeing, however, in academia, in the business world and corporations, women are beginning to dominate, especially in the lower tier and mid-tier positions in these corporations and companies. What can men do about it? Well, the best thing they can do, if they want to get a foothold into the corporate world, would be to strengthen their social skills and compete with women in that regard. It is not impossible. In very appropriate Sith-like fashion, at the end of the day, all that matters is who has power. There are those with power and those without, and only those who wield it make an influence in the world. Strengthen yourself. Remember, if one is to understand the great mystery, one must study all its aspects. Become strong in your masculine side, meaning the qualities of individualism, the ability to think for yourself, leadership ability, and so forth. But also, do not depend on these abilities alone. Strengthen your social skills. Strengthen your understanding of human psychology. Men tend to be emotionally callous, but you can compensate and mimic, in a way, the emotional intelligence of women by reading all you can on human psychology and really trying to understand the social dynamics, which, as I have done, has served me well. The most powerful Force users in Star Wars oftentimes are not dedicated Sith or Jedi, but a combination of both. I think of the Bendu. I think of the father of Mortis. I think of Cade Skywalker. I think of Darth Tyrannus. I think of Exar Kun. All those the Sith who were Jedi previously returned to the Sith are often the most powerful because they have experience with both sides, and that is what you must do here. Master the feminine side, master the masculine side. Have strengths in both areas and be able to channel that energy